You're listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast with Matt Tomasi and can be found at borntokickarse.com/episode 37.
Welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast, where you're introduced to the most fascinating people on the planet. Learn the ingredients of greatness that you can apply to your life. And now your host, Matthew Tomasi.
Hello, listeners. Podcasting is an awesome way for me to share my passion with the world and provide you with inspirational interviews. The only downside with podcasting is that it's one-way communication. My guest and I talking and you listening. Now is the time for me to start building a kick-ass tribe with people like you. People who listen to my podcast, people who hear where I'm coming from, people who want to improve themselves and want to kick ass in life. Let's start building a relationship. To get the ball rolling, I need you right now to head to my website, borntokickarse.com, and sign up for my free newsletter. Once again, that's borntokickarse.com. Once you've signed up, I'll be able to find out from you what you want to improve in your own life, whether it's creating your own website or launching a podcast, or you want to improve your health, or you want to set and achieve big goals, or whatever it may be. Sign up now. I'm looking forward to connecting with you. Ben Smith ran 401 marathons in 401 days around the UK. This epic feat, known as the 401 Challenge, has raised £300,000 for anti-bullying charities. Ben shares some insight into his own life, including being bullied throughout his school years, 2 failed suicide attempts, overcoming depression, and suffering a transient ischemic attack, otherwise known as a mini stroke, at the age of 29. In this interview, Ben shares some of his experiences during the 401 Challenge, including suffering a fractured vertebrae in his spine. Enjoy the interview. Ben Smith, welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks.
Now, I can hear you're a little bit under the weather. How's your body feeling and your metabolism and just your general well-being, because you've come off the end of something that we'll definitely be talking about more and more, but how do you sort of feel post this massive challenge that you've done?
It's been mixed emotions, really. I think mentally I've struggled because it was just over a week and a half ago now that this epic challenge finished, and going from being very structured for a long period of time to kind of, in a way, not having any structure at all has been a little bit of a shock to the system. So I've struggled with kind of finding a purpose, I suppose. And I suppose physically, as you can tell, I'm a little bit under the weather. I have had the man flu, which we all know as men is terrible. And it's got me down a little bit over the past kind of week or so, but I'm kind of coming out the other end of that. But it's, no surprise considering what I put my body through for the past kind of year and a bit.
Yeah. Now, for listeners who haven't heard of you, you haven't run 100 marathons back to back. How many marathons did you run back to back?
So back to back, it was the equivalent distance of running 401 marathons in 401 days. And I did it all around the UK to raise £250,000 for 2 anti-bullying charities here in the UK. And I completed it on the 5th of October, a few weeks back.
Yeah. Before we sort of delve into that, the 401 challenge as it's known, can you maybe give us a background on yourself? Like, just maybe give us us and the listeners an overview of your younger years and like your schooling and just give us an idea of that.
Yeah, of course. I suppose I was like any any other kid really. Kind of growing up in the very, very early years, had an exciting life, loving parents. And I suppose it was a little bit different in the sense that my parents were in the forces. So my dad was in the RAF here in the UK, and it meant that we got to move around the world quite a bit. So there was always that sense of adventure, that kind of sense of seeing different places, meeting different people, kind of immersing yourself in different cultures. And I really enjoyed that. Unfortunately, that kind of all changed when I turned about 10 years old. In those days, unfortunately, schooling, if you were posted abroad for British kids, ended, and it meant that you had to kind of look for other avenues of education. At the time, we were living in Germany on an American NATO base, and it meant that I either went to an American elementary school or I went to a German high school. And unfortunately, both my parents thought that my education would be disrupted, so they sent me to boarding school in England, which was, wasn't untypical of military families to do that. Now, it was a hard decision for them, obviously, because we were a very close family. I suppose you have to be when you're in the forces because you're a unit. You travel together, you support each other. And me going away to school kind of almost ripped our family unit to pieces. Both my parents were very close, still are very close, still both married, and it almost ended their relationship. That's how kind of dramatic it got. And I think me going away to school, I ended up in an environment where it was quite cold, it was quite unpastoral, it wasn't very supportive, and I felt like all my foundations had kind of been ripped out away from underneath me, which meant that I became quite an easy target for bullies. And this, I suppose, lasted for 3 years until I was around 13 years old, and then I moved schools, still staying within the boarding school environment because my parents had kind of come back to the UK but been moved to the north of Scotland. And it got to the point where I moved schools and thought that the problem would not move with me, but it did. And then around about the age of 13 in my new school, obviously still kind of suffering from the bullying, both mental and physical, I got to the point where I started to figure out I was maybe a bit different to other kids. I started to figure out that I was actually gay. And this, to be honest with you, scared me. And the reason for that is that back in those days, it was spoken about very negatively. I suppose homosexuality wasn't really spoken about at all. But when it was spoken about negatively. And, when you're a young teenager trying to figure out who you are, and when you figure it out and then realize that actually it's wrong, and that you shouldn't be who you are, it can be quite disruptive to your development. And it was in my case. I continued to be bullied all the way up until I was 18 years old for being gay, even though I had never confirmed it. I used to get chased down corridors and beaten up in my room, which was supposed to be my sanctuary, really. However, that I didn't really ever have any personal space, a bit like social media bullying nowadays. You couldn't really get away from the problem. And I didn't tell anybody about it because I was ashamed. I was ashamed of who I was. I was ashamed of what was happening to me. And because I'd seen both my parents go through what they went through to send me to boarding school, I didn't want to add to the pressures that they had gone under. So anyway, at the age of 18, it all got too much for me. And I remember going down to dinner one Sunday evening and having my dinner and then taking a knife from the cutlery drawer in the canteen and then taking it up to my room with full intent of ending my own life. And I started to do it, and there was a knock on my bedroom door. And when I opened the door, there was nobody there. So God knows what it was, whether or not it was divine intervention or whether or not it was, somebody just playing a prank. It stopped me from doing it, but that sent me into a bit of a nervous breakdown, and my parents ended up finding out, and I was pulled from school. And it was at that point really that all the issues around the bullying kind of came out, and you can imagine both my parents were quite hurt and angry about the whole situation, not with me, but with the school for not taking care of me and not preventing this from happening. And I ended up seeking some counselling. I ended up having some therapy and some treatment, but I suppose inside of me I was kind of broken. I didn't really talk about the reasons why I'd been bullied. I kind of made up reasons, the fact that people thought I wasn't good enough, or that I was different to other kids. But the issue of kind of being gay had never came out, because I was scared. It had been so kind of conditionally built into me that being gay was subhuman, it was dirty, I was weak, I wouldn't be able to live the life that I wanted to live because of it, which when I look at the life that I have now, it can't be further from the truth. I then went off to university. I suppose at that point in my life, I was quite numb to a lot of things, and I was really just existing. I had no visions, no objectives, no wants of my own. They were all kind of governed by other people. And I did a degree that I didn't want to do, but it was told to do. I ended up getting into, I suppose, the wrong group of friends, doing things I probably shouldn't have done. And yeah, my life was pretty much a mess. And it was shortly after going to university that I kind of thought, well, this isn't getting any better. So I thought I'd try and take my life again, with the full intent of not wanting to be here. It wasn't a cry for help. I ended up having my stomach pumped after that attempt. I took a number of tablets. And I suppose it was at that point in my life when I decided that if I was going to be happy in life, then I needed to, I suppose, do what society had deemed as being normal, which was to lead a straight life, to get a good, decent job, have a nice car, have a mortgage, all of those things that would be deemed you to be successful in life. So that's what I did. I finished university, I got a job, and I basically just existed all the way through until I was 29 years old, which was when I suppose the next chapter of my life started to begin.
Now, at this point in your life, were you running at all? Like before the age of 29, which we can talk about, but were you a bit of a runner at all, sort of, through these years up until 29 or not?
No, not at all. I think like a lot of people, I kind of dipped in and out of certain things. At school, I swam, but that was really more of an escapism, and I was good at it, but I wouldn't say that it was a passion. I actually hated running at school. I hated running throughout my adult years, and I suppose I was the type of person that worked 60 to 70 hours a week at work, and was piling on the weight, was drinking, was smoking, doing all the things that were bad for you, and always thinking that I needed to get fit, I needed to get healthy. I needed to look after myself. But, even to the degree of watching the adverts on the TV, for these exercise machines and thinking, it's the answer to everything. But I'd never found a passion in sport at all. That was my brother. He was a professional rugby player here in England. And, he was the sporty one in the family, not me. And it was funny, actually, because I used to get a gym membership at the beginning of every year, and I suppose I went about 2-3 times, maybe got into it for a few months, and then it just kind of fizzled out again. I wasn't ready to kind of do what I ended up doing. I suppose it was just a case of me existing and trying to find quick solutions to making my life better.
Yeah. So can you tell us a bit more about what happened to you at the age of 29?
Yeah, so at 29, I was sat at work. And don't get me wrong, I was enjoying my job. I felt I had purpose. Even if it wasn't the purpose that I wanted out of life, I felt I had purpose. And I was about 16 and a half stone in weight. I was a smoker and I was a drinker. And I remember being sat at my desk and then suddenly not being able to see. And obviously that kind of freaked me out quite a bit. And then I remember not being able to kind of hear anything out of my left ear. And then I remember kind of getting pins and needles down my left arm and numbness around kind of my left chest area. And we quickly typed all this information into Google, and it said, you need to go to hospital. So that's what I did. I went to hospital, and I was diagnosed as having had what they call a TIA, which is a Transient Ischemic Attack, an incompleted stroke. And I kind of thought at the age of 29, I had this. That doesn't happen to people at the age of 29. It's not supposed to happen to people at the age of 29. That's an old person thing. That's what I was thinking at the time. And I kind of thought, this can't be my life. If this is what the end is like for me, or if this is what the ramifications of me leading my life the way I've led it, then I need to change. So it was at that point, I suppose, that my life really started to change. But it wasn't like in the movies where you suddenly have this, I suppose, epiphany moment and then everything makes sense. If anything, the TIA was the epiphany moment. It was then the hard work then started, trying to uncondition myself from the ways I've been acting for the last 19 years, which was really tough.
Did you start to exercise as a means to try and just get back on track, get your health back on track, lose a bit of weight? Was that sort of how running was introduced, like post this TIA episode that you had?
I'd like to say I wish it was, but actually I complained and I moaned probably for the year after I'd actually had my TIA that I needed to get fit and healthy, and I did bugger all about it, to be perfectly honest with you. That was the reality. I kind of thought I could go back to the way that I was living my life, and that this was a one-off. And it was actually a friend of mine about a year later that got so sick and tired of me moaning about the fact that I should get fit and healthy that she dragged me down to my local running club. And that's kind of where my journey and my real life started.
And what was that, just sort of fun runs every weekend? Just
Well, it kind of started very much like with most. I couldn't run for a bus when I first started to run, and it was annoying. It was frustrating, but then on the same hand, it was incredibly amazing because I was doing things that I probably never thought that I could do before. If somebody had said to me, 4 years ago that I'd have done what I've done, I'd have probably laughed in their face, sank my pint, and lit up a cigarette, to be perfectly honest with you. There was just kind of no correlation on me being able to do what I've done. It was difficult. It was difficult to kind of start. I started off, I think my first ever run, if I can remember back, it was 2 miles. And if I say run, that's probably not necessarily accurately true. It was more along the lines of walk a bit, run a bit, walk a bit, run a bit. But I tell you, the feeling that I had when I got to the end of that was just, it was like I'd won a gold medal at the Olympics. This was something that I never thought that I'd be able to do. I was terrified of going to the running club because in a way I regressed back to how I felt at school, because I thought everybody was going to point at me and laugh at me. I thought I didn't belong there. I'm 16 and a half stone. I'm not an athlete. I'm not an elite athlete like you see on the telly. But what I figured out on that day was that actually sport is for everyone. It doesn't matter how good you are or how bad you are at it, as long as you enjoy it. And that was one thing that I did. I finally on that day found something that I did for me for the first time in my entire life, but also something that I could be passionate about.
Tell us about your first marathon. How did that come about? Like, did someone sort of dare you to do one, or tell us about your very first one?
I suppose it was quite progressive. I'd always watched the London Marathon on the telly, and I always had this want to do it, even though I didn't know how to do it, if you get what I mean. Yeah. I didn't know what training was involved. I didn't know what, I suppose, what needed to be done to kind of get me to that position. But obviously, having started out at this running club, I think it was about 6 months after I started to run is when I ran my first marathon, and it was the Brighton Marathon in 2013. And I think because I'd found something that I was passionate about, i.e. running, and something that was giving me everything that I kind of wanted it to give me, which was more confidence, more self-esteem, belief in my own ability, kind of little challenges that I never thought I'd be able to achieve before I was now achieving. My confidence was growing. So in a way, I got swept up with it all. And I signed up to the Brighton Marathon in 2013. And let's just say the first 19 miles were amazing, and I loved it. The last 7 miles were pure hell. Yeah. And I remember near enough crawling over the line. Not a bad time. I think it was coming up to 5 hours. I was still over the moon that I'd managed to cross the line of a 26.2 mile run. And the feeling, I suppose, of accomplishment was just incredible. I was euphoric. And obviously you then had the day after, and the day after that, where everything starts to ache and you're kind of going down the stairs on your bum, and you're thinking, why on earth did I do this? But it was actually 3 days later that I got the credit card out again, and I signed up to my second one. And I think it was that point that I was hooked.
Yeah. So that was, when was that, 2013?
2013, yeah.
As the years sort of progressed past that, you did a number of additional marathons. When did this idea of the 401 challenge come about? How do you go from running, like one marathon a year, and then, in subsequent years you do some more? And then what was it that went off in your mind that you even going to attempt something like this?
Well, first of all, I suppose it wasn't the thought of running 401 marathons that kind of came into my mind in the beginning. That wasn't the, dare I say, aim of the initial idea. I think the easiest way I can kind of explain it, and I've not yet figured out exactly how it all came about. It just kind of did. It was very organic. It kind of grew from literally a pipeline idea. So the pipeline idea started back end of 2013, beginning of 2014. It was more along the lines of, can I do something that nobody else has ever done? That was the initial thought. And I thought, I needed to build my confidence more to figure out, A, what I was going to do, and B, whether or not I could do something like that. To do something that somebody else has not done is a difficult thing in so many different ways. And in 2014, I actually ran 18 marathons all around the world. And that was all about building my confidence in running, figuring out, how my body worked, how it recovered from running marathons, but also kind of meeting new people and enjoying my life. I used to work Monday to Friday, and then on the Friday night, I'd then fly somewhere, be that Oslo or be that Helsinki or be that, Berlin, and run, spend the Saturday in the city, run the marathon on the Sunday, and fly back the Sunday night to start work again on the Monday. This was kind of my life for 2014, and it was incredible. It was an amazing adventure. was just kind of feeding my soul for even more adventure, and more travel, and meeting more people. And with each marathon, I was kind of gaining more confidence and more belief in my own ability. I started to work with a personal trainer as well here in the UK, a level 5 personal trainer, mind and body, PT. And, he helped me with the mental aspects of kind of getting fit and getting my mind, I suppose, in a good condition in order to kind of help my body develop.
Did you find as well, like, with the regular running training that you're doing and also getting the mind coaching from your coach, did you sort of find that that part of your life started to gain more confidence and in your everyday life outside of running?
Yeah, definitely. My work life changed, and I suppose my whole kind of I started to take charge of my life. I started to look at what made me happy. And it was interesting, I read this book, which was entitled Being a Free-Range Human. It was by an American author whose name I can't remember. But I don't read.
What was the name of the book again? I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, it was Being a Free-Range Human. Yeah, cool. And really what it was about, I think her name is Marianne Cantwell. Yeah. It's a very easy book to read, and it was actually given to me by my PT. And I think the first thing I thought when he gave it to me was, "Oh, here we go! It's another self-help book." But it was more than that. I started reading it, and I remember this instance where I was flying to Reykjavik to run the Reykjavik Marathon, and I was getting to a part of the book where it suddenly asked me the question, "What makes you happy?" And if you can imagine this, I'm sat in the window seat of a plane that's kind of climbing, and it's grey and dreary underneath the clouds. And then this question gets asked in this book. And the moment I read the answer, the moment I read the question in the book, we actually come through the clouds and it's bright blue sunshine with these marshmallow-like clouds. It was quite symbolic. And, I kind of remember sitting there for the duration of the flight thinking, what makes me happy? And do you know what? I couldn't figure it out. Everything that I'd done in my life had been for other people. As I said before, I had no visions, no wants, no objectives of my own. But what running was starting to do for me was allowing me to kind of take charge of my life and kind of, in a way, cure me of my past. That's probably the best way I can explain it. And with that came confidence. With that came a new sense of belief in my ability. With that came a newfound want and excitement to explore the world and do things that I never thought were possible, which was in a way regressing me back to how I was when I was before 10 years old. Again, going back to that sense of travel and adventure that I had when I was younger. And it was always back then that I'd said to my mum and dad that I wanted to have an adventure. I wanted to be an adventurer. I wanted to be somebody that had a cool life and, did things that other people had never done. And it was only the kind of middle section of my life that nearly destroyed that. But if anything, what that middle section's done is it's given me that fire in my belly and that kind of purpose in order to achieve the things that I wanted to achieve. So, the idea started to develop in the beginning of 2014. I needed to gain confidence. I needed to gain self-esteem. I needed to figure out whether or not, I could run a load of marathons, let alone back-to-back marathons. And once I got to the end of 2014, it's when we announced that the challenge was going to be taking place. And again, even at that point, we didn't know how many we were going to do. All I knew was that the kind of next step for me was back-to-backs. Yeah. So I suppose the next logical thing for me was to see what I could do in back-to-back marathon running. Yeah. And that's when I signed up to do 7 marathons in 7 days across 7 states of the US in, I think it was April 2015, so last year.
And how'd you pull up after that? How'd you pull up after the second day? You'd completed the first marathon And then the second marathon, in the 7-day stretch, were you feeling it? Were you pretty sore at the end of the second day?
Well, it's funny because I actually got given some advice. By this point I'd run 23 marathons by this point, because I'd done 3 prior to me going out to the States. So I was experienced in marathon running. I'd got a 3:17 PB in Oslo the previous year. So I was running at a good level for me. And my body was physically fit. The next step for me was to figure out how back-to-back marathon running felt. And day 2 was actually fine. It was getting over that mental hump of, okay, I ran a marathon yesterday. How am I going to run another one today? And if anything, and I suppose we'll come on to it a bit later, but a lot of back-to-back marathon running and a lot of adventuring is very much a mindset. Your body will go where your mind wants it to go, and that's what I found right the way through this project. So it was just really kind of getting myself over that mental hump, and I was given a bit of advice to slow it right down on the first day, which I did. And if anything, that helped me on the second day. I think it was day 4 that was my hump day. But the whole week was just an incredible experience. I met some phenomenal people. One of which was a guy called Larry Macon. And he is the current world record holder for the most amount of lifetime marathons. I believe he's now over 1,800 marathons run in his lifetime. And this is just a guy that I met on the course.
Random guy
that I met on the course. Yeah. People were saying to me, "You do know who he is, right?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't got a clue. I don't profess to know anybody in the running community. I've not been in it long enough." And we've been chatting. We chatted every day. I walked some of the loops with him, and I just soaked up everything that he could tell me about running, about his experiences. And I think he was a massive influence in the way I run now. And I suppose the ethos in which we and the values that we brought to the project. It was when I finished that 7 in 7 days, the confidence that I felt in my own ability was it was through the roof. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't it was a quiet confidence inside me. And it was actually then that I believed that I could do what I was about to set out to do.
Now, how did the number 401 come about? Why 401? Why not 200? Or why not 333? G'day guys, Matt here. This podcast is a labour of love and all episodes are researched, scheduled, edited, created and promoted in my spare time. Typically, after an episode has been recorded, it can take another 3 hours of post-production activities to get the final cut. If I'm providing you with value and you wish to support my vision of sharing these inspirational stories to the world, you can do so at borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. Your support will help to maintain the monthly podcast running costs and enable me to outsource repetitive tasks so I can bring you even more Kick Arse episodes. Once again, if you want to support me in producing this podcast, head over to borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. You can't miss it. And now back to the rest of the show. Now, how did the number 401 come about? Why 401? Why not 200? Or why not 333?
Well, it's a bit complicated, and I suppose the way to understand it would be is to kind of understand why I run. That's probably the simplest way of putting it. Is I don't run for records. I don't run for my name in a book, or I don't run for a certificate. I run because I really love to run. It's in my heart. It's my soul food. It's what feeds me. And when we decided to do this project, when we decided to announce it and figure out what number we wanted, we had a set of objectives which we'd kind of come up with, which were to raise £250,000. We wanted to raise awareness of the issues of bullying in the UK. We wanted to inspire and, I suppose, challenge people to do things that they never thought were possible and to get as many people involved as possible. And we knew we wanted to run back-to-back marathons in order to do that. So, I'm not a celebrity. I can't put my name to something. I don't have that profile where I put my name to something and it generates millions and millions of pounds worth of sponsorship. So I knew that if I was going to do something, I needed to do something big, and in a way, something more than anybody had done in the world. So the logical choice was to look at what the world record was. And we looked at the world record at the time, and that stood at 52. It was by some Japanese dude that had run around a track in Japan 106 times for 52 days. And I kind of looked at it and I went, well, I'm not doing that, because that's just mental. The mental strength to do that would be just insane. And also, if you think about it, it didn't really sit in with what our objectives were. We wanted to get as many people involved as possible. You wouldn't be able to do that if you were in one place on one track. We wanted to spread the awareness of bullying around the UK. Again, you wouldn't be able to do that if you were on a track in one place. I think we also looked at the criteria of Guinness, and it's very strict. Of course it is. It has to be in order to be fair. And again, it kind of conflicted with what we were trying to achieve in our objectives. So we made the choice then and there of why we were going to do this and what we were doing it for. And it was for our objectives, not the objective of achieving a world record. We then did some more research, and it actually transpired that there were a couple of other people around the world that had done more. So I believe there was an Australian couple that had done 100. We found. I believe there were two Americans that had claimed to have done 250, and then at the time there was a Spanish gentleman that was looking. It was either Spanish or it was Belgium. That he was looking at trying to run 365. So we couldn't find anything more other than a few kind of unsubstantiated records that a few people had done more than that. The most that we could find was 365. So we thought, well, I'm a lover of numbers. So I decided to round the 365 up to 400 because I like closed numbers. I suppose it's a bit OCD-like, which I'm sure a lot of runners can probably relate to. And it was actually Larry Macon in the States that was responsible for the one. When I was running with him in April, he turned around to me and he said, well, why don't you have a victory lap? Why don't you have something where you can celebrate what you've achieved and I suppose bring together people that have run with you throughout your journey to celebrate in what you've all achieved? And actually that's what we did on the 5th of October in Bristol in the UK, where we had about 372 people come out and run with us, but we also had around 2,500 people globally running on that day as well, in celebration of what we'd achieved. So it was a very organic way of reaching the number 401. And I suppose to some people they think, well, it's just a very random number, but at every point there was a meaning behind it. But it was an organic meaning and a true, genuine meaning behind why it became the number 401, which I think is why it resonates with quite a lot of people that get involved in the project.
So how long did the planning take? So, the actual planning phase up until sort of marathon number 1, how long was that period?
It's quite a while. I think it was beginning of 2014 that I started to plan. I'm talking simple planning, things like what countries do I want to run in? Do I want to just run in the UK or do I want to run around the world? to the degree of choosing the UK. Okay, so now how many do we want to do? Which obviously I've just explained how we got to that. Then there's kind of picking the locations. Do we do a logical path around the UK, or do we incorporate in official marathons, which is what we chose to do in the end, which then meant that, we needed to also look at the fact that would I be driving myself around the UK between marathons? Would they be point to point, or would they be circular routes starting and finishing in the same place? What types of people would we need in the team to support us? Would I be doing this on my own, or would we want to get other people involved? So all these little things, all these logistical things, looking at where we were in the UK based on weather. Did I want to be running in the north of Scotland during the height of winter? Probably not. So, made sure that we stayed down south for that. There were so many variables that we kind of had to look into that I actually enlisted my dad, who used to run battle rooms in the military, to help me out with the logistical planning. So yeah, we came up with the logistical plan, and then we got my mum on board to help with the therapy and the accommodation, and we built the website with a web designer friend of mine, and we built a load of, I suppose it was a get involved section on the website that allowed people to actually offer their services, because this whole point, it was about get people involved. And not everybody can run, not everybody wants to run, not everybody enjoys running, but what they can do is offer a little bit of food on a night time or a bed to sleep in, and they're getting involved in a different way, but still keeping the project afloat. And I tell you, the amount of people that got in touch, it was just overwhelming. It kind of restores your faith in humanity. And I got to say, without the people that got involved in the project, be that running, be that helping with therapy or accommodation, or even just, we had people filling up my van with fuel, all around the country. All these people made this challenge a success, got me to the end.
Tell us about the very first marathon on this 401 challenge. Where was the first one?
It was in Bristol, so I started and ended in the same place. So I remember setting off from a place called Millennium Square in Bristol. And, there was press there, and the local press had picked it up, the national press hadn't. And it was, there was like a small group of my friends and, a few people there to say goodbye. And my mum and dad were there. My other half, funnily enough, was actually in Australia at the time. He'd flown out to Melbourne about 4 days before the start of the challenge, and then had spent a bit of time in the Gold Coast with friends of his out there. So he wasn't there, but my project manager was there. And I've actually seen some video footage recently of me leaving, and I look completely different to what I look like now. Let's just put it that way. I've lost a lot more weight. But I think you can see the look in my eyes that, there's that sense of excitement, but there's also that sense of terror, thinking, after I've completed today, and I was still on home soil, so I was still on familiar ground. After I finished today, I've then got 400 to go. And I couldn't quite fathom that in my head. It's like people who think 401 marathons in 401 days. I can't quite see that. I can't quite get that in my head. Well, let me say I was exactly the same when I started.
Your mind naturally sort of projects forward to, like you're on day one, and after day one, your mind starts still projecting forward, thinking, oh, I've got 400 to go. Do you have any sort of tips or techniques that you have learnt along the way to bring your mind back to the present, not to project forward?
Yeah, definitely. I think, that was one thing that I had to learn very quickly it's about learning what motivates you, I suppose. And for me, it's food and coffee. Yeah. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I love my food. I love my coffee. So rather than waking up every morning and going, oh, right, I need to run a marathon, I would wake up and go, right, okay, I need to run 8 miles, then I'll have a coffee, then I'll run another 8 miles, I'll have some lunch, and then I'll finish it off. And I never ever, I was lucky enough to have a team of people behind the scenes who didn't travel with me. I traveled on my own. But like my dad was at home in Lincoln, which is a different part of the UK to where I am. He would be dealing with the running clubs in each of the areas who were planning the routes. He'd be, my other half would be dealing with like the accommodation, the therapy. Mum would be looking after the finance. Everything would be covered behind the scenes. So all I had to do was concentrate on the running, which in a way meant that all I had to concentrate on was the present. So kind of having people to take away the stresses and the pressures behind the scenes really helped me. I think the fact that I got people involved as well in the project helped me out massively, because it got to the point sometimes where I was hurting so much that actually I needed to focus on something else. And I believe we had just over 9,500 people that actually ran with the project, of which I think it was just over 1,600 people ran further than they've ever run before in their lives. And of which I think it was about 650 of those people ran either their first marathon or ultra. So my role in that was to help them through that. And it meant that I wasn't focusing on my pain anymore. Yeah. I was focusing on somebody else's, which was keeping me in the present again. I never used to look at, my calendar. I had a mobile phone with me all the way through this, an iPhone all the way through this, which had Google Calendar on it. And the team would download everything 2 to 3 weeks in advance. But I'd never look at what was going to happen tomorrow. I'd always look at the current day, which again made me stay present. It was a case of, in a way, decompartmentalizing things, setting yourself small goals. And that's what got me through. And also putting in things that I was looking forward to. So, my other half's father, Colin, he ran 31 marathons with me all around the UK. So he'd come out and travel and run with me. And he'd never run a marathon before in his life, but he wanted to come and be part of it. And, we got to know each other a lot better. And, we went through some rough times, but some amazing times. And, it's the same with Kyle's mum. Kyle's my other half, by the way. Kyle's mum, she never ran, but she ran her first ultra marathon on the final event. It was insane, the amount of things that happened throughout this project that kept me in the present, but kept me motivated. It's like with anything in life.
Yeah, that would have been a good feeling, you're sort of at the start line of a particular marathon, and someone sort of comes up out of the crowd who's going to run with you on that day, who basically says, this is the first time I'm going to run a marathon. That would have been quite special to share that 42 Ks or 26.2 miles with a newbie, That would be
good. You know what? This was happening every day, Matt. Yeah. Every single day. And I think because we also shared this success on Facebook as well. We have over 40,000 people that follow us on Facebook, and that grew organically right the way through this project. And I think not only because of the reasons why we were doing it, but also, running gave me self-esteem and confidence back. This is why we wanted to give it to other people as well, and having people come and be involved. I always said that this project was to be inclusive. So I would always run at the pace of the slowest runner, which in a way helped me. It meant that I could recover while I was running. I was running a lot slower than what I probably would normally have run. But what it meant was that it was giving them the confidence and self-esteem in their own ability and getting them to do things that they never thought were possible. So when they finished and they'd done their first marathon, or they'd run 16 miles, which was 10 miles more than they'd ever run before, they would then go away and say to their friends, have you seen this project? Have you heard about it? And then their friends look at it, and maybe their friends join me because I'm in a completely different area of the UK then a week later. The amount of people that came out that said, I've come out because my friend ran with you, or I came out because, my friend got a PB and I want to get a PB. We never talked about PBs as in time. It was always distance PBs. And it became a family of 9,500 people. That's the feeling that this project has. And I believe we've made a difference in UK society. I really do. In not kind of raising awareness of the subject of bullying, but also in the kind of tangible things, people's confidence, people's ability. We have over 1,500 people that have run further than they've ever run before in their life that they wouldn't have done without this project. Yeah. And they've enjoyed it and they've loved it.
Now, you would have gone through countless highs and lows. I read in another interview that you did, marathon number 284. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I was in northeast Scotland, in Aberdeen, and it was actually 280 when I started to get some twinges in the bottom of my back. I'd actually run a marathon every single day for 280 days, and I started to get twinges in the bottom of my back, and it went into spasm, which isn't pleasant. Everything locked up. And kind of, because I was in that mindset of kind of carrying on and so focused on what it was I was trying to achieve, I kind of thought, and the 300 mark was coming up as well, which was going to be John O'Groats. And I kind of thought, if I can just get to John O'Groats, then I'll get it seen to. It was then over the next kind of 4 days up into 284 that things got worse a lot quicker. My spine started to kind of contort, and I went from standing up straight to not even being able to stand up straight at all. And it got to the point where I couldn't sit down, I couldn't stand up, I couldn't walk, let alone hardly run. I was on codeine and got paracetamol, and I was spaced out. And I could still feel pain. I couldn't sleep, so I was exhausted. I was frustrated. I was just not the nicest person to be around, to be honest with you. And it was actually a family friend of ours that I was staying at up in Aberdeen. And it was coming to the time when I was going to be leaving their home to kind of make my way around the kind of northeast of Scotland up through kind of Fraserburgh and then across the top into Inverness. And I'd be staying in campsites and driving myself, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't physically do it. So I went to the hospital in Aberdeen, and I walked in, and basically the doctor said to me, "You need to stop." And I think it was at that point when I just broke down and I started to cry. And I think half of it was because I was so emotional at the time and I was so out of it and so exhausted that I broke down. But also there was this sense of all the people that I might be letting down that have planned routes in the future, or people that had helped me in the past, and me not achieving what I wanted to achieve. And it was actually the team that decided for us to take the 10 days off. We got a contingency plan in place that if something like this had ever happened, the decision would be taken by the team and not me. And I'd signed that across that would be the case. And they took the decision that I was going to stop. So I got the train from Aberdeen down to Preston, which is in Lancashire, which is on the west coast near Manchester and Liverpool, which was where my other half lived at the time. And I spent 10 days there, and I saw a kind of highly renowned physiotherapist in the UK who treated me for 18 hours that week and sent me for an MRI scan in a private hospital in Wilmslow near Manchester. And it actually turned out that I was diagnosed with something called spondylolisthesis, which is a weakness at the bottom of the spine. And because of the sheer amount of running that I'd done, I'd actually fractured my L5 vertebra, which was then irritating the disc, which was impinging on my spine and sending sciatic pains down both my legs, which was then, my body's natural reaction was to lock up and go into spasm. And it had actually got so bad that my spine had started to turn into a bit of a corkscrew, which was why I looked the way that I looked and couldn't do the things that I wanted to do. So that needed to be fixed. That was fixed within 10 days, which I was quite surprised at, to be perfectly honest with you, because I thought, how can you fix something like that? My vertebra is still fractured now, even after the project, but I had things that I was able to do to kind of manage it. So I went back to Inverness, which was where I was going to be when I was due to go back. And it was at that point that we decided that I was going to make up the 262 miles that I'd missed out. And that's what I did. I decided to run ultra marathons then until we made up the deficit.
So you'd lost 10 days and you were down, and then you decided to do more. I think, what were you averaging, 33 or 35 sort of miles?
No, I think I suppose the point is that we kept it flexible because of my back problems. Again, it was about my health. The challenge, yes, was important, but the overriding thing here was my health. Without my health, we wouldn't be able to achieve the challenge. Without my health, I wouldn't be able to have any form of life after this challenge. So that was the most important thing.
Sorry, was that the lowest point of the challenge that you endured?
Oh yeah. It was, it was at some time. I remember going back to Inverness and running there, and actually I ran 30 miles on the first day going back, and I was on such a high because I thought, yes, I'm back. It was a real kind of like, my other half travelled with me up from Preston to Inverness. And I remember saying to him all the way up, going, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I want to do this. Now, I think it was more being scared that I couldn't carry on. So that first day back was a really important day for me. And it was interesting because I went to bed thinking, yes, I've done it. I woke up the following morning and I felt like rubbish. I hurt so much. And I was in a place called Dingwall, which is just north of Inverness, and I had 3 people out running with me that day. It was raining, it was cold, and I was just there thinking, I can't do this. And it was hilly, and what I found was kind of, the hillier the course, the more pain it would create on my back. So, there was a lot of re-strategizing and a lot of communicating to the team, and then them communicating out to local running clubs that we were working with going forward to change routes if we needed to, if they were too hilly, because, contrary to popular belief, there were, 98% of the running clubs that were supporting me did an amazing job. The other 2% wanted to test me. We were at their mercy, really. We said to them, you plan a route and we will run the route. So, we ended up going up a few mountains, let's just put it that way.
Was there any particular person that you met over these 401 days that sort of really stood out in your mind?
Yeah.
Or I'm guessing there'll be a heap, but is there sort of one or two that's, the particular conditions that all sort of came together that has really sort of stuck with you since? Yeah,
there's kind of, other than my other half's dad and his best friend Pete, who were just incredible to me, and their wives, like Carl's mum Pat and Pete's wife Shez, they were amazing to me right the way through this. But I made a best friend out of this challenge. I met a guy called Nick, who actually works for the London Met Police, and he rocked up to one of the marathons. It was in Reading actually, and I think it was around about day 60. And he said, "If you don't mind, I'm going to run the next 5 days with you." And I think I remember, I've said this to him, but I think I remember saying in my head, "Oh God, what if we don't get on?" And thinking this is going to be terrible. But yeah, we have such a similar sense of humour. And after those 5 days, I actually missed him. We hit it off massively, and And it was Nick actually came back and ran the last 15 with me of this project, which I wouldn't have actually had anybody else run with me during that time. It was, obviously people did in different areas, but like if I was to think about one person that I would want to run with me for the last 15 days, it would be him. Yeah. And, it was amazing to have met him, and, he's my best friend now. And, I feel very lucky to have obviously met him. And there was this one other lady as well that I'd heard about in a place called Bognor Regis, which is on the south coast of the UK, again, quite early on in the project. She'd been training for an Ironman and had come off her bike and actually severed her spine and become paralysed. And, I got an opportunity to actually meet her at Stoke Mandeville, which is one of the big spinal injury clinics in the UK. And I remember meeting her, and we just hit it off. We both got very sick senses of humour. And I remember us being able to go around the track. They've got a running track, so she was wheeling around the track and I was running next to her. And, that was just a momentous occasion. And again, I made a friend for life. Yeah. It's when you do something like this, and you do it for the right reasons, and you do it because I run because of the purity of running and what it gives me. I am who I am. I'm nobody. I don't pretend to be anything that I'm not when I'm running. And outside as well, I'm comfortable with who I am. And what that's done is it's opened me up to so many people and so many opportunities that I've just taken with both hands. And I wouldn't be in the position that I am now if I hadn't have found it.
So, you've met hundreds or even thousands of strangers, people that you've never met before. People have just sort of come out of the woodwork and, joined you on this journey. What have you sort of learnt about people that all these strangers that you've met, all these countless people that you've never seen before, is there something that you've learnt about people, or is there something deeper that you've sort of seen in I guess, other humans that really stood out to you, during your time out on the road?
I think the one thing, and it might be because of the circumstances that I took this project on, is that I found actually that there is good in everyone. Before this, I'd be quite, skeptical. I think modern society makes us all quite skeptical about other people, what they're wanting to get out of it, what they're trying to, prove, I think if anything, what this project has done is it's kind of made me look at people in a different way and think actually, there's good in a lot of people. And there's a lot of people out there as well that aren't happy. That's one thing that really shocked me in this project. Really aren't happy. They're doing things because they think that's what they should do. They're leading their lives in a way that they think they should. When I spoke to them about, you can do a marathon today. Of course you can. Their automatic thought is, oh no, I'd never be able to do that. There's that kind of, I don't know if it's the British mentality.
Sorry, did you sort of find people were sort of using you as a bit of a sounding board, for those 26 miles? Like, people sort of unloading their problems and sort of was that I'm guessing that would have been a thing happening every single day.
Yeah, of course. People do like to talk. I like to talk, as you can probably tell. Can't shut me up half the time. I've been told, I can't count the amount of times that I've been told that this is the first time I'm telling anybody this has been said, which it's just an honor. It's a real honour to kind of, feel that people think that they can talk to you about things. I was very careful not to take on board people's problems, though, because I had enough of my own. That was one thing I needed to make sure that I couldn't do. But I think running, unlike a lot of other sports, is a very social sport. And what it does is it knocks down people's boundaries. We tried to create an environment every day that was supportive. There was no pressure. It was fun. And that the people at the back that might want to walk and run had the same experience as the people at the front that just wanted to run the whole way. Now, that's really difficult to create, but we managed to create that every single day. And I think what that did was create an environment where people felt that they could be who they really were and could say things that they probably never thought that they could ever say. And, it's a bit like when you walk and you meet people on a coastal path, or you meet people on the towpath from a different country, or, from a different place, and there's only you guys there. You end up talking about things that you would never probably talk to anybody in your daily life about. But that's because you're at peace. You're at one with, I suppose, dare I say, nature, and you're a lot more open to things. And that's what we managed to create every single day. And I'm incredibly proud about that. I really am.
Tell us about the last marathon. Was that, on the final day, you set off on the 1st of September 2015, and then I think Marathon 401, when was that, the 5th of October 2016?
Matt, the bell's just gone. Can we
Yeah. I'll pause it. It's all good.
I'll pause it there. 2 secs, mate. 2 secs. Yeah. Hi, Matt.
Hey.
Hiya. Hi. Right. Yeah, we've got 26 boxes being delivered at the moment. So they're just going outside
those boxes?
So I suppose jiffy bag envelopes, because we put on a virtual challenge for the final marathon. And now we're just posting out all the medals all around the UK and around the world to people that took part. Yes. So yeah, all the envelopes have arrived.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Mm.
So tell us about that final day, the final marathon. What was sort of going through your mind? Were you excited? Were you sad that, it's sort of coming to an end? What were your emotions on that final day?
It was strange because, going back to what you said before about living in the moment, I was very much doing that. So to the degree where even in the last mile of the final marathon, I wasn't thinking about crossing the line or finishing, which was really strange. I was excited about that last day, and I in a way, I was ready for the project to be over. I wanted to kind of get back to, dare I say, some sense of normality. We had so many people there. We had international press and local press, and the day started early at about 6:30 with interviews on national TV, and BBC World covering the project. And it was an orchestrated day in the sense of everything had to be organised to a T. We had 372 people that turned up to run with us on that final day that had all bought a ticket, and it was just an incredible experience. And if anything, it was quite symbolic because the course that I designed for the last day was actually the course that I learned to run on. It was all the places that I went when I very first started running, and yeah, it was a magical day, to be perfectly honest with you. Yeah. One that I'll never forget.
I saw some footage of you it was either on YouTube or on your website with the the champagne bottle after you'd finished and you're sort of spraying the crowd with champagne. Had you done that before? Or?
No, never. But I'll let you into a bit of a secret. It wasn't champagne. It was actually apple cider.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it was. There's a local cider factory near here. A factory which I am synonymously related to, dare I say. And they gave us a bottle of their Thatcher's cider fizz, and that's what I sprayed the crowd with, including all the TV cameras. Yeah, but I did ask whether or not they were waterproof before I did it.
So after the 401 marathons, I got to ask, sort of going back to the very start of this interview, you've got a bit of a cold now. What did you do on day 402? Did you take a day off, or did you sort of have a shorter run, or what did you do?
Well, I had a shorter run. I weirdly enough, because nobody's ever done this before. There's nothing written. There's no kind of research. There's no, dare I say, nobody really knows what I need to do to cool down from this. Except there's the logic and the belief that I need to cool down. So I was planning on doing a month's worth of back-to-back halves, followed by a month's worth of back-to-back 10Ks, and then a month's worth of back-to-back 5Ks to kind of wean myself off of running back down to a normal level. But it got to the point where even on the first day after the challenge, I didn't really have a massive amount of motivation to run, funnily enough. So I went out and I did an 8.5 mile run, and I didn't enjoy it. It was for the first time I didn't enjoy it. And then I kind of forced myself out for an 11-mile run the following day. And again, I didn't enjoy it. And I was starting to get ill. And I thought, right, I'm just going to take 2 days off, and I'm going to kind of readapt my cool down process. So I took 2 days off and, got sicker and sicker and sicker, but decided to adapt my cool down to more of a cross training way of doing it. So incorporating the likes of spinning and personal training and running and swimming and all those types of things. So that's what I'm going to be doing for the next 3 months to kind of help wean myself back off onto a more of a normal form of exercise plan.
Yeah. It's almost weaning yourself off endorphins.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's, I am addicted to them. And I don't want to kind of go into another challenge. We have very defined plans of what we want to do with the legacy of what we've created. So that doesn't involve another challenge. So it's important that I kind of wean myself off these endorphins, but also, the fact that I was eating about 6,500 calories a day, I don't want to be piling the weight on either.
Yeah, that is a bit of a something to consider. Like, if you've been running heaps and then, your mileage drastically reduces, your hunger is still going to be there, and there is that risk of sort of piling on the weight potentially. Yeah,
exactly. It's quite funny actually, because I've not experienced that just yet because of not being very well afterwards. When I'm not very well, I don't eat a massive amount. My appetite goes. So when I get better, I'm assuming my appetite is probably going to go back up to what it was.
You've raised, what is it? Like, I'm on your website, which is the 401challenge.co.uk.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing, I think it's just under, what is it? Just under 300,000 pounds.
It is, yeah, 294,000 pounds, I believe we've raised, which is 44,000 more than what we thought.
Yeah, that's incredible. And what are the two charities that you did this for?
So I did it for two anti-bullying charities, which are Stonewall and Kidscape. So Kidscape is the UK's biggest anti-bullying charity, and Stonewall is a charity that's set up basically to work at bringing equality to the LGBT community in the UK. So both charities are very personal to me and my experiences that I went through at school.
And whereabouts can people find you elsewhere online? You've got your website, the401challenge.co.uk. Are you anywhere else online?
Yeah, we're kind of plastered across social media, to be honest with you. And the best places to find us are on Facebook at the 401 Challenge. But we're also on Instagram and Twitter as well at the 401 Challenge too. So if you go to our website, the401challenge.co.uk, and you scroll down, there is a Connect with Us block, and you can click on the Facebook, the Twitter, or the Instagram icon there, and that'll take you directly to our page where you can follow us. As I said, we've got about just over 40,000 followers on Facebook from all around the world that have followed our project from the beginning, which is just incredible. And we've got a lot of amazing plans for the future, which we're really excited about and which we're working on right now.
Can you sort of share your plans that you're sort of working towards?
Yeah, of course. So, as I said, we want to create a legacy based on what it is that we've achieved. And, the best way to do that is by creating a foundation, a charitable foundation, which is what we're currently in the means of setting up now. This foundation will be a grant-based foundation called the 401 Foundation. And it will work at building self-esteem and confidence, tackling mental health and self-development issues of all ages in the UK. So we will be a self-funded foundation, and we'll fund ourselves through an events company that we're also developing. We look to help grassroots projects all around the UK, which feeds the same values as what we've had throughout this entire process. And it's a perfect start. Or sorry, dare I say, it's a perfect end to the challenge, but a perfect start to the next chapter of the 401.
Now, just before we sort of kicked off this interview, you mentioned the Pride of Britain. Well, can you tell us about that? That's coming up shortly?
Yeah, the Pride of Britain Awards. So the Pride of Britain Awards is the biggest award ceremony that Britain has. It's attended by royalty and celebrities, and it recognises real people that have done insane things. And it's I've watched it every year, and you can't help but well up when you watch it. You really can't. But we were lucky enough to be nominated by our followers for a Pride of Britain award for Fundraiser of the Year. And we found out the other day that we'd actually won the regional award for our area, which then meant that we now go to the official ceremony on the 31st of October. And we will find out whether or not we've won the national award, which would be incredible for the foundation going forward, and would really kind of cement ourselves in the charitable sector as a commercially viable opportunity for people to invest, which would be fantastic. And also, if anything, it's a thank you to everybody that has supported this challenge from start to finish.
Yeah, well, it's an incredible thing you've done. 401 marathons. It's incredible. And the reasons that you've done it, the raising money for charity and stuff like that. It's incredible. Just before we go, is there one last sort of piece of advice that you could give someone who's listening to this who is suffering from some form of bullying? Whether it's at work or they might be at school or uni or wherever. If someone's out there who is getting bullied, is there any sort of advice you could sort of give them that you've, you could maybe share?
I suppose it's I'm asked this quite a lot, and bullying is different for everybody. I suppose that's kind of the point. And it's finding somebody that you can trust. It's finding somebody that you can confide in to talk about what's happening to you, and then come up with a plan together to help deal with it. But I think that's advice that I give to anybody that's being bullied. However, I think anybody that's been bullied before in their life that has been affected by it so much, like I was, I say this to people all the time, the limitations that we put on ourselves are our own, but we just have to kind of believe in what it is that we're trying to achieve. I think bullying has so many ramifications for loads and loads of different people. I think that it is one of the biggest causes of mental health issues in in adults in later life, it can wipe you of your confidence and your self-esteem. And I think, if anything, it's about bringing that to the forefront of people's thoughts. It's possibly not a subject that is talked about as much as what it needs to. We've done something about it here in the UK through the 401 Challenge and brought it to the forefront. I don't know what happens in Australia around the subject of bullying and whether or not it's talked about as openly as what I believe we now talk about it here in the UK. It's an epidemic. It's a problem that we need to solve. Unfortunately, it's not just going to be solved overnight.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming on to the podcast, and 401 marathons. It's quite incredible, and you've done something incredibly inspiring. And thanks again for coming on to the podcast.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thanks a lot.
You've just been listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast at borntokickarse.com. If you liked what you heard and want more, please subscribe on iTunes. Give a 5-star rating and a Kick Arse review. This really helps to boost our presence and continues to allow us to introduce you to the most fascinating people on the planet. Welcome aboard, and catch you next time.